So, today's lesson in our popular America, in our modern America sort of series, is popular culture in the 1950s. So we are shifting away from the civil rights movement discussion to talk about consumerism and popular culture in the 50s. Among white suburbanites, the 1950s were marked by similarities in social norms, consensuses about political issues, and conformity in social behaviors were safe harbors for Americans troubled by foreign ideologies of communism. At the same time, the consensus and conformity were the hallmarks of a consumer-driven mass economy. So we are talking about full-scale consumerism like we experienced in the 1920s. So we are first gonna look at the television. And see how that topic impacted society. Little more than a curiosity in the late 1940s, television suddenly became a center of family life in millions of American homes. By 1961, there were 55 million TV sets. So 55 million TVs. About one for every 3 Americans, roughly. So 1 in 3. Just jotting down notes. You should be jotting down notes too. Television programming in the 50s were dominated by 3 national networks. So 3 national networks. And why I'm spending so much time on television is something we all can see and grow from and see that change in television culture throughout our lives and what sparked that culture back then. Which presented viewers with a bland menu of stimulated comedies, westerns, quiz shows, and professional sports. FCC Chairman Newton Minow criticized television as a vast wasteland and worried about the impact on children of the steady dose of 5 or more hours of viewing. Yet the culture portrayed on television, especially for third and fourth generation of white ethnic Americans, provided a common content for their common language. So, worried about children. So let's set this up. Television, 55 million TVs. So it was widespread. So widespread widespread use, right? We can all agree on that. But there was only 3 national networks. Today's like, how many networks do we have? Like 20 big networks and 50 others. I'm just shooting spitballs here. So very limited. Worried about children. We are still worried about children's health effects when it comes to television. So, now that we broke TV down, I can come sit back down and discuss a few more consumer trends. Just wanted to give you an in-depth look at TV culture in the 50s. So, advertising. So, television equals advertising. So, let's see how advertising plays a role in this dynamic. In all the media, television, radio, networks, and magazines, aggressive advertising by name brands promoted common material wants and the introduction of suburban shopping centers and the plastic credit card in the 1950s provided a quick means of satisfying them. The phenomenal proliferation of chains of fast food restaurants on the roadside was one measure of success for the new marketing technique and standardized products as the nation turned from mom and pop stores to franchise operations. So let's jot that down because that's a glaring shift that this book describes. So, mom and pop. And you know, my family owns a mom and pop restaurant. So, this mom and pop restaurant, mom and pop to franchises. It's a pretty good shift to what's going on in terms of culture in the 50s. And credit card, debit card, other advertising methods were used to convey this message. Despite television, Americans read more than ever. Paperback books, an innovation in the 1950s, were selling almost 1 million copies a day in 1960. Popular music was revolutionized by the mass marketing of inexpensive, long-playing record albums and stacks of 45 records. Teenagers fell in love with rock and roll music, a blend of African American rhythm and blues and white country music, popularized by Elvis Presley. So, corporate America. In the business world, conglomerates were diversified. Holdings began to dominate such industries as food processing, hotels, transportation, insurance, and baking. For the first time in history, more American workers held white-collar jobs than blue-collar jobs. To work for one of Fortune's magazine's top 500 companies seemed to be the road to success. Large corporations of this era promoted teamwork and conformity, including a dress code for male workers of a dark business suit, white shirt, and a conservative tie. The social scientist William White documented this loss of individuality in his book, The Organization Men. So this shift to corporate America. So here's another shift. Here's shift number 2 that this book points out. This working America to corporate America. And do you see a connection between those two shifts? Exactly. Big unions became more powerful after the merger of AFL and the CIO in 1955. Remember that? They also became more conservative as blue-collar workers began to enjoy middle-class incomes. For most Americans, conformity was a small price to pay for the new affluence of a home in the suburbs, a new automobile every 2 or 3 years, good schools for the children, and maybe a vacation at the recently opened Disneyland in California. So this whole idea of a suburban lifestyle became the norm, became the culture of this movement to suburbanite. Organized religious expanded drastically after World War II, with the building of thousands of new churches and synagogues. So this big shift to more making the America a more religious place. Let's talk about the women's role in all this. The baby boom and running a home in the suburbs made homemaking a full-time job for millions of women. The traditional view of a woman's role as caring for home and children was reaffirmed in the mass media and in the best-selling self-help book Baby and Child Care, 1946 by Dr. Benjamin Spock. At the same time, evidence of dissatisfaction was growing, especially among well-educated women of the middle class. More married women, especially as they reached middle age, entered the workforce. Yet male employers in the 1950s saw female workers as primarily as wives and mothers, and women's lower wages reflected this attitude. So women were still seen as being home taking care of the children, all that's nice stuff. So all of this led to some social critics, which we are going to get into right now. Not everybody approved of the social trends of the 1950s. In The Lonely Crowd, 1958, Harvard sociologist David Reinsman criticized the replacement of inner-directed individuals in society with other-directed conformists. In The Affluent Society, 1958, economist John Kenneth Galbraith wrote about the failure of wealthy Americans to address the need for increased social spending for the common good. Sociologist C. Wright Mills portrayed dehumanizing corporate worlds in White Collar and threats to freedom in The Power Elite. So that is the discussion of popular culture in the 50s. I hope you stick around for next video's topic, which we are going to start with chapter 28, Promise and Turmoil in the 1960s. So hopefully you'll join me there.